Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I am wearing the same outfit as I am in another video because I have the time to do all the videos right now. Today's video is going to be a birth story on all three of my kids. I start my YouTube channel after I had all my kids, so I was never able to do like those separate birth stories. But anyways, I'm going to go ahead and start with Aiden's. Now, my pregnancy with Aiden, he is about to turn 5 in April. It was extremely easy, never had a problem, was never getting sick, nothing like that. Yeah. Just so you know, Jax is over here sitting in the high chair eating. Actually, let me give him a couple more so he stays a little bit more quiet. Okay. So, like I was saying, I had a very smooth pregnancy with him. I would say it was around week 37, I believe, though. My blood pressure did start rising a little, but that's it. Like, I only had the high blood pressure, like slightly high blood pressure. It was never super high. I didn't really have other symptoms of preeclampsia. I mean, I was getting headaches, but I constantly get headaches, so that's like nothing new. But it was at like my 38-week appointment when she checked my blood pressure again. It was higher again. She checked it at the end of appointment once I was like relaxed and just sitting for a while. It was still getting a little bit higher. So she decided that she was going to induce me at 39 weeks. So forward to 39 weeks, we went into the hospital to be induced. They did give me Pitocin. Unfortunately, I don't remember the time frame. This was almost 5 years ago now, and I feel like every kid I have, my memory gets worse and worse. My experiences have not been very pleasant, so I feel like my brain personally just wants to forget it. Because if I remembered every experience 100%, I don't think I would have had the next baby, because it's just, it just has not been pleasant at all. They've been pretty bad. They've just gotten worse every time. But anyways, what happened was they were doing Pitocin and I wasn't really progressing. I don't even know how many centimeters I ended up getting dilated, but I don't even think it was more than 4, to be honest with you. I know I did end up getting the epidural. Now they gave me whatever dose of the Pitocin was, and it wasn't progressing like they wanted it to. I think it had started affecting Aiden. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe some of his numbers were decreasing, so they took me off for a little while. I don't remember how long, but they eventually put me back onto the Pitocin, and I wasn't on it very long. There was a nurse, she was in the room. I was getting very uncomfortable. They wanted me to sit in like one position. I don't remember why they wanted me to sit in that one position. I think it just had to do with his numbers. And I remember telling her, like, I'm getting very uncomfortable. I need to like switch into a position. I had been in the previous position for probably an hour, not able to move. And I'm just not somebody who can really sit still. I get very antsy, very uncomfortable. So I had asked her if I could switch into a different position. She said yes. I switched into a different position. I believe I asked if I could lay on my side, if I'm not mistaken. So when I went and I laid on my side, I think I was in that position for maybe a minute or two. And then all of a sudden, she must have hit a button without me knowing. I would say about 6 to 10 nurses, doctors, I don't know what they were. Just people came into the room. Oh, wait, rewind a little bit. So, sorry about that. So, rewind. My husband and my cousin Scott were actually in the room with me at this time. But they had the curtain closed. So, they were behind the curtain, sitting on the couch. And the reason the nurse was in the room was because she was checking me, or she needed to check me. So, we closed the curtain. I don't think she got to the point of checking me. I think she was doing like my vitals and everything at the time. But anyways, as I was in that new position, a couple minutes goes by and all of a sudden, swarms of people keep coming in. I don't know who they were, nurses, doctors, whatever. They all came in. Then all of a sudden, I just started noticing they were unplugging everything and throwing it onto my bed. I had no idea what was going on. Nobody was telling me anything. All right, sorry about that. Jax was getting very cranky. Anyways, so I didn't know what was going on. They just started throwing all the wires on me. Keep in mind, my husband and my cousin are behind the curtain. They have no clue what's going on. I don't even know if they could hear that something was going on. I don't know. So they immediately started wheeling me out of the room, and there was an alarm going off in the hallway, which I didn't know what that was at first, but the alarm was going off because of me. I had no idea what was happening, but I knew something was wrong. And like, I instantly started crying. I had no clue what was happening. If it was me, if it was my baby, no idea. My husband has no idea I'm being wheeled out of the room. In the end, I asked him when he kind of figured it out. He said he finally figured out that something was wrong when it was super, super loud in the room. And then it went like quiet because I was already out in the hallway and everybody was following me. So he opened up the curtain and he told me that he pretty much started chasing me and all the doctors down the hallway. But I guess by the time I got wheeled through the doors into the operating section or whatever, you know, he can't go any further. So they told him he pretty much could not be there. He couldn't go in there. I don't know what else they told him. I never really asked. But they get me into the operating room. They're transferring me onto tables, putting things in me. And then I find out that his vitals plunged and something was wrong. So finally, you know, they're in the middle of the operation. At some point, Brian did get to come in. I believe it was before Aiden came out. I'm not 100% sure. Like I said, I tried to forget all of these experiences, all the bad parts of these experiences. It's actually kind of hard to think about because it was so scary and like he wasn't there with me. But sorry, here I go. Anyways, I know that the C-section took longer than it was supposed to. They say C-sections take, 45 minutes to an hour, something like that. I was in the operating room for about 2 hours total, like from the beginning all the way till finally being able to get wheeled out. In the end, I guess the cord was wrapped around his neck and it must have been strangling him or something. I didn't really ask too many details. It's just like once you see that baby, you forget everything. So when I saw him and he got put, like it was kind of on the side of me, like on my boob kind of, it just diminished. Like I had no worry. I had nothing. He cried. I heard him cry for the first time. I'm exhausted from all the stuff they were giving me. So I didn't even get to hold him too long because I was shaky and I did not feel like I could even hold him, like without possibly dropping him. So my husband then went over with him and, you know, was watching him on the ventilator, and I think that's what it's called. I'm not 100% sure. Anyways, I finally got stitched up, went to recovery. When we finally did get into my room, I remember that, I don't think it was a horrible recovery per se. It wasn't my best and it wasn't my worst. But you know, I had no idea what to expect. I wasn't here planning for a C-section. I mean, not most people aren't for their first births anyways. But I remember I had the hardest time trying to walk. The pain was pretty bad for me that time. So I thought that was really bad. But besides like that whole just emergency C-section, the cord being wrapped around him, I think it took like a little bit for him to make the first cry. So that was very panicky. The fact that I am laying on a table for over an hour waiting to hear him cry. It was a miserable experience. You are terrified. You have so many thoughts going through your head. I didn't know what to do. Like, I didn't know what to do. But once I was in recovery, you know, I had Brian. We didn't have any other kids, so he was with me all the time, 24/7. We did let him, well, we had to let him go to the nursery because he ended up having to get blood work done. He had an IV. I think it was in his hand. I know we have pictures. I can try to find a picture, and if I can, I'll try to insert it so you can see, like, he had this giant thing on his hand. But besides that, everything else pretty much, I would say, went fine. I don't think I really went through postpartum, like, depression or anything like that with Aiden. It took me probably, that's a good question. Okay, I would say a couple weeks, and then I felt pretty much normal. Yeah, so that was pretty much Aiden's birth. Then we come to Damon. Damon, I believe my pregnancy also went pretty well, but with Damon, I started off my pregnancy, I was working 2 jobs. That didn't last very long because Damon had me so tired. So for me to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning to be at work for 4:30 was nearly impossible. So unfortunately, I did not have the opportunity to stay at this job. But I had another job that I worked from 1 to 9. And then it ended up turning into like a part-time job in the end. But like I was working 4:30 to 12, and then I would go to my other job from 1 to 9. Sometimes I would get lucky and I would get out, you know, 10 o'clock in the morning, and then I'd go in for 1. So I'd be able to go home and take like a quick nap or whatever, but it didn't last long. So the point of me saying this is I was just so tired with him all the time. And then I had, you know, Aiden. So it was just, it was tough. It was pretty, yeah. It was tough, that's for sure. But I would say that Damon's pregnancy, from what I remember, was also just very easy. Like I had very easy pregnancies with these two. They were just, they flew by, you know, just, I can't physically remember them being difficult. Yeah, but anyways, I did have some insurance issues with Damon, which caused me to have, his birth at a different hospital. So this was a different hospital. It was a scheduled C-section because, oh, that's right. Okay, so with Aiden and all that, I ended up having a tear on my uterus. So because of that, it wasn't too severe, but because of that, I was recommended to have repeat C-sections for all my future kids. Because to try to have, I guess, vaginal birth, it creates a lot of pressure, and the tear could possibly tear again, which can cause a lot of complications. So I had to have a repeat C-section, which I was very upset about, just for the fact that I really wanted to experience it naturally. But in the end, you know, as long as he's good and healthy, you know, it is what it is. So we had it scheduled for 39 weeks. Typically, they all are scheduled for 39 weeks, somewhere around there. So, you know, we go in and I have to get my epidural, and during the, or is it spinal tap? I think it might have been a spinal tap. One of them. During the process of putting that into my spine, I got poked in the wrong spot, which caused a complete shock down the left side of my body. It was so shocking that I instantly started crying and shaking. And it took me a few minutes to calm down. It's not like you can have your significant other in the room with you either. So they're trying to calm me down, but it's like all I wanted was Brian. That's just that simple. That's all I wanted was Brian. Sorry again, my kids came into the room. So all I wanted was Brian. That didn't happen. In the end, I think it was a student who was trying to do it. So then the real doctor took over and they did it. It went through, everything was fine. My C-section, you know, started. I ended up being on this table for about 2.5 hours. Apparently I had a ton of scar tissue and it made things really difficult. But besides that it was, I mean, besides just being there for so long, it was fine. So, you know, you go through recovery. That was fine. I believe it was fine. You know, I get to my room and, oh, something I forgot to mention is I did have bleeding that they were having trouble controlling after Aiden. But it wasn't like bad. Like it wasn't really that worrisome. But anyways, back to Damon. When I got to my room, we were having more problems of controlling my bleeding. It was to the point where they started getting a little bit nervous and I had to get shots in my butt. There was multiple things that they were doing to try to get the bleeding under control. Eventually, I believe after like 12-ish hours or so, they finally completely got it under control, if I'm not mistaken. But I don't remember the timing of my surgery, but I'm pretty sure it was in the same day. So the night at like, hold on. I think my surgery was in the morning, and then by nighttime, they tried to get me out of my bed and going to the bathroom. I told them, no, I'm not ready. I can tell I'm not ready. But they pretty much were like, well, you need to get up and you need to try to walk to the bathroom. So in the process of them getting me up, it was taking a long time, which it does, as people who have had C-sections, they know it's not easy getting out of bed, especially the first time. I'm getting out of bed. I'm about halfway to the bathroom door. So literally in like the middle of just an empty space. And I immediately start getting dizzy, lightheaded, and apparently the nurses knew something was wrong because my lips went from like this color to purple. Like they just went completely purple. And my face went pale. And they immediately like almost kind of dragged me to the toilet seat and sat me down. And someone had pulled the thing. A bunch of nurses came in. Somebody ran out, got apple juice, brought it back to me. And I remember hearing one of the nurses says, I don't think she was ready to get out of bed yet. And I instantly, like, well, not instantly, that's a lie. But when I finally got back to bed and sat down and was able to really think about it, I started getting really mad, like really pissed off. Because that's exactly what I told them. I wasn't ready. I knew my body. I know my body. Like, I wasn't ready to get out of bed. I just went through the traumatic thing with my back and the spinal tap or whatever it was. It just, it was not fun. But besides that, I would say that the only frustrating thing about the afterbirth of Damon would be that this hospital just doesn't listen. They never listened to what I said. I couldn't really get up because of the issue that happened in my back. Come to find out, apparently what I found out after, I didn't know this at the time, that where they poked probably gotten swollen and was having a really hard time, or I was having a really hard time. Like, I could not stand up straight. I had to walk and my body was practically at a 90-degree angle because I could, like, the pain was unbelievable. So when I would walk to the bathroom, I looked like a hunchback. Like, I could not stand up straight. It wasn't happening. I could not physically stand up straight until after I was already home. And I was in the hospital for 5 days. So it took about a week for me to be able to like stand up normal. That was not easy. I would say that and the bleeding was probably the most difficult about Damon's birth. But on top of that, because I could not stand and I was having such a hard time getting out of bed, if, for instance, Brian was home with Aiden, I was the only one there, I could not get out of bed or do anything for the baby. So at night, me and the nurse who was leaving like before the night shift, we had agreed upon like the baby was going to stay in the nursery until Brian got back the next day, or she had time to bring him to the room to like kind of like stay there with me because I couldn't do anything. Well, that nurse left, and I don't know if she relayed the message or the other nurse didn't care, but this new nurse pretty much brought him in, the crack acid on. I don't know if it was 5 o'clock. I don't know if it was 6 o'clock. I don't know what time it was, But she literally walks into the room. I'm passed out to the point where like I just started waking up because I heard her come in, turn the lights on. She pushes Damon's, cart right beside the bed, walks out. Literally just walks out. I start panicking. I call Brian. I'm like crying because if the baby wakes up, I can't do anything. So then what? I have to sit here and call a nurse and wait for them to come into the room to soothe my baby. Like sometimes, as all you mothers I'm sure that have given birth know, it can take like 10 plus minutes for the nurse to finally. So that was probably, it was just honestly, this hospital I hated. I just did not like it. And I don't know if that's because I was spoiled at the other hospital. But this hospital, it just, once I was treated one way, there was no way I was going to be used to be treated like that. So I did not enjoy that at all. Moving on, Jax's birth. Okay, so as you guys have heard so far, every birth I've had has gotten a little bit longer. Every birth I've had has had worse bleeding, but the pregnancies themselves have been very easy. Jax, I would say the pregnancy was very easy for the first maybe 6 months or so, 6.5, 7 months. I'm not 100% sure on that. But the last, 8 to 9 weeks maybe of my pregnancy were tough. I had acid reflux so bad. I couldn't sleep. I was uncomfortable. I ended up having carpal tunnel in my like dominant hand. That was misery. Holy cow, that was misery. I mean, I couldn't feel anything on that hand. Like I could poke it with a needle and I could not feel it. On top of that, it was tingling all the time. Things just got rough at the end of pregnancy, like they do. Again, repeat C-section. But at this point, I had the opportunity to switch my insurance back to the original plan that I was on, which meant that I could go back to my original OBGYN who I loved, and I could go back to the hospital that I loved. So I went back to her. She didn't know too much except for what the doctor notes were on my birth with Damon. But between all of those notes and what I had expressed to her, she felt it was safe. More like it would be better for her to have another OBGYN with her for my C-section. Which in the end, it was very, very good that she did. So, 39 weeks comes. I'm waiting to, go in, whatever. This was very, this C-section was the absolute worst. The after was the absolute worst. And I feel like this experience has kind of traumatized me a little bit. And if it wasn't for that, I think I would be more willing to have another baby. But there are things that I do still remember that I can't get over. Let me, I guess, just start out with saying, so I believe it's the spinal tap, so that if you're on the table long, your epidural isn't going to wear off. They can just keep putting more medicine into you. Long story short, I was laying on the operating table for 3.5 hours. I mean, I was in the operating room for a total of 3.5 hours. There was so much scar tissue. They were having trouble getting him out. And mind you, there's two doctors in this room. 2 professional doctors who have been doing this for a long time in this room doing this. There are other doctors in the room, learning and stuff like that. So I believe there were 3 pairs of hands constantly, like, doing whatever. I don't know what they do besides take the baby out, but I remember my husband kept telling me that there was blood everywhere on the floor. Blood had splattered onto the sheet that like covers so you can't see what they're doing. It was just a really horrible experience. And for all you mamas who have had C-sections, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Laying on that table for what is an average of an hour, I'll say, for most people, it's horrible. To lay there, you can't feel anything but tugging. You get burning, like gas sensations here sometimes. Like, everybody's different. But it's horrible to just lay there and, like, you never know what's going on. And then you have to, like, sit there and you're listening for that cry. It's horrible. And average is like an hour. I was on this table for 3.5 hours. That is traumatic to sit there. It was horrible. Like, the things that were going through my mind the entire time. My husband telling me there's blood everywhere. They're like, you can hear them talking, but you can't hear what they're saying. My husband said at one point, both of the doctors were trying to pull the baby out of me and they were having like the hardest time. He said it looked like they were like working out, trying to lift weights. Like, that's how hard they were trying to get the baby out. As to why it was like that, I don't know that aspect. I have no idea. Maybe they should have made the hole larger. I don't know. But anyways, the 3.5 hours go by. You know, I get into recovery. I am so loopy from the amount of medicine that I had to get for the fact that I was on this table for 3.5 hours. I did obviously spend time with Jax. Jax was perfect. When we got back to the room, I believe it was the rest of this day. This is where everything really just, it took a turn. Like, I was bleeding so bad. It was just like every 2 seconds for like hours, I had gushes of blood coming out of me. And not just blood, TMI, skip this part if you don't want to hear it. But, you know, the afterbirth stuff, blood clots, the blood, everything. It was coming out and it wasn't stopping. That's the problem. I had blood clots, apparently, that were so large, they were very concerning to all the nurses that would come into the room and check me or clean me. Every 5 to 10 minutes, someone had to come in the room and switch out the pads. So they called a doctor in because they were concerned about the size of the blood clots and the fact that they couldn't get the bleeding under control. So they came in and apparently they weren't that concerned. But what really was getting to my head was I could feel the amount of blood. I could feel large things coming out. The nurses, every nurse that would come in and check me would make a comment and they would call in other nurses and be like, does this look concerning to you? Like, you know, whatever. And all the nurses were concerned. So why wasn't the doctor? Like, I know he's the doctor. Or no, it was a she at this point. It was just, it was very confusing. And all I knew was that I could just feel the amount of stuff coming out. That's all I knew. So this went on for, I would say, a couple hours. A new nurse came on, I believe, and she was super concerned because one thing came out and it was, I guess, very large and concerning to her. Another doctor came in and said, like, yes and no, it's on the verge of being concerning, but they weren't sure. But the fact that they still haven't been able to control it, that was concerning. So they had another doctor come in who was a male, and he, you know, took a look, whatever, and he was a little concerned. And I don't remember all, like, why he had to do this, but he said that they have, like, if he can do it this way, it's going to prevent me from needing an additional surgery, I guess. So I don't even know how to put this into words of how bad this was, but he had to physically take his hand and go up. I didn't do vaginal birth, but a man's hand, I'm sorry, but for my body, this is impossible. Impossible to up there. That's impossible. Well, I swear to God, by the amount of pain, it felt like he did the impossible. It was excruciating. If I tried so hard at first to not cry, to not scream, to just keep as calm as I could, and then it got to the point where I am screaming bloody murder in the hospital, like telling them to stop. Like, stop, please stop. Like, I don't know how else to put it. And the thought of, like, my husband is sitting there watching me in terror, not knowing what to do. Like, in his mind, he said, to see your wife going through that, and it's a doctor and it needs to be done, but you can't do or say anything because it needs to be done. How do you... I don't know. It was a very bad experience. It was traumatic. It was painful. I would say what terrifies me the most is that every single birth that I've had more bleeding, more clots, longer surgeries, more scar tissue. And it's just at this point, I would be absolutely horrified to have another baby. I absolutely would. I'm very content at where I am now. I don't need another baby. I have 3 boys. Yeah, I would love to possibly have a girl one day, but at this point, I have no desire for any more kids. 0. But beyond the birth and the afterbirth part, by the next day, I was completely walking around. I wasn't on as many painkillers as I ever was with the other 2. It was just like, it was my worst birth experience, but my absolute best recovery. Absolute best recovery. It was like magic. Like, my husband's asleep. I couldn't sleep. I got out of bed and walked to the nursery. I didn't talk to a nurse, nothing. I just went. It was just, I was fine. I could do everything on my own, where the other 2 times I couldn't. You know, the first time I was terrified to move because of the pain. Like, you literally feel like if you stand up, you're going to fall out. I didn't have a belly band the first time, so that made like a really big difference. I think I got it on like the last day or something like that. But like, I always had the belly band on during the recovery with Damon. That made a difference. That helped my back a little bit. But then Jax, I always had the belly bands on, and it was just like, I'm just walking around like, hey, I just gave birth, but I'm good. Like, I just had major surgery and I am good. So that one was obviously very, very perfect. But yeah, I mean, besides that, Jax is a happy 9-month-old baby now, and I'm hoping his teething is calming down. But besides that, that's pretty much my birth stories for all 3 of the boys. I know this video is going to be longer because it is 3 separate C-section birth stories. One being an emergency C-section, a repeat C-section, and another repeat C-section. You know, my last one feeling like I'm bleeding to death. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like, comment, and I'd love if you'd subscribe. I do videos of motherhood, lifestyle, cleaning, hauls, just stuff like that. So if you enjoy videos like that, please do subscribe, and I hope to see you guys in my next video. Bye!